It wasn't the betrayal that stung the most. It was the feeling of being utterly invisible. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to write something like this, especially not on a forum like Reddit. But here we are. I need to get this off my chest, to lay it all out, because I've been carrying it for too long. It all started with a phone call. I know that sounds cliché, but I swear, this one call completely flipped my life upside down. It wasn't even the most shocking part of what happened, but it was the moment when the entire facade of my life came crumbling down. Her name was never important, not at first. I didn't notice her at the bar. In fact, I didn't notice anything unusual at all when I first met her. I was just a regular guy, working at a small tech company, living my average life. It wasn't anything exciting, but I didn't mind it. I didn't need excitement. I had a steady job, a decent group of friends, and everything seemed fine. I wasn't looking for anything more than what I already had. And then, she came into my life. The way she moved, the way she smiled. It wasn't like anything I had ever experienced before. There was this energy about her, this kind of magnetic pull that I didn't understand at first, but soon became addicted to. We didn't meet through any special circumstances. It wasn't some love-at-first-sight story. It happened in a way that felt natural, even if it was far from it. One evening, she called me, out of nowhere. There were no texts leading up to it, no prior conversations. Just a single call. "Hey," she said. "I know we haven't really talked much, but I was thinking about you. How's your week going?" It was one of those questions that seemed completely random, but also pointed. Something about the way she said it made me realize that this wasn't just small talk. She was probing, testing the waters. I didn't know why, but I found myself intrigued. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. By the end of that night, I felt like I knew her in ways I didn't even understand. There was something about her that made me want to share things I hadn't even told my closest friends. It was almost as if she was pulling the truth out of me. For weeks, this continued. Random calls, late-night texts. Always just when I least expected it, but always when I needed it. She was there in a way I didn't know I wanted. And without realizing it, I started to depend on her. But there was one thing I didn't know. One thing I couldn't have possibly predicted. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when everything came to a head. I had just finished a long day at work, and I was exhausted, physically and mentally. I was ready to collapse on the couch and do absolutely nothing for the rest of the night. But as I was about to sit down, my phone buzzed. It was her. "Hey, can we talk? There's something I need to tell you." The message was simple, but something in it sent a chill through me. I wasn't sure what was happening, but I knew it wasn't just a regular conversation. I called her immediately, my pulse quickening. "What's up? You okay?" But she didn't answer at first. There was a long pause before she finally said, "I need to be honest with you about something. Something I've been hiding." I felt a wave of confusion hit me. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I've been seeing someone else," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "For a while now." I froze. My mind raced, trying to process what she was saying. I had been so caught up in everything, in the late-night calls and texts, in the deep conversations we'd shared, that I never stopped to think about her life outside of the conversations we had. I never asked, never even wondered about her commitments, her boundaries. She had slipped under my radar in a way I never thought possible. But it wasn't just about her confessing to me. It was about the way she said it. The calmness in her voice, like it wasn't a big deal. Like she wasn't telling me she had been with someone else, someone who I didn't even know existed, for months. "You need to understand, I never wanted to hurt you," she continued, as if it made any sense. "It just happened. And now I don't know what to do. I never planned for this." I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me. I wanted to shout, to scream at her for what she had done, for how easily she had tossed me aside. But instead, I just sat there numb. I asked her the only question that seemed to make sense at that moment. "Why me? Why tell me now?" Her response was colder than anything I could have imagined. "Because I think you need to know the truth. And I need to stop pretending." It was in that moment I realized something. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was just empty. The person I thought I knew, the person who had slowly become a fixture in my life, had been hiding a version of herself that I would never have known. A version that she was willing to discard as easily as she had picked me up. That was the day everything changed. And the day I began to understand that people, no matter how close you are to them, can be completely different from the image they project. But this was just the beginning. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. I kept waiting for her to say something, anything, to explain herself. But she didn't. Her confession hung in the air like an unwanted guest, suffocating any space for clarity. I was still processing what she had said, struggling to make sense of it all. "Are you still there?" she asked after what felt like an eternity. I could barely manage a response. I wanted to ask her how long it had been going on, who this other person was, but the words wouldn't come out. Instead, I just muttered, "Why?" Her voice softened, almost pleading, but I could hear the weariness in it. "Because I thought I could have both," she said. "I thought I could have you and him, and everything would be fine. But it's not. And now, I don't know what to do." I wanted to scream at her. How could she even think that would work? How could she believe that two lives, two separate realities, could coexist without crashing into each other? But I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just sat there, on the edge of my bed, holding my phone like it was the only thing keeping me grounded in reality. "What do you want me to say?" I finally asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Do you want me to forgive you? Do you want me to tell you that it's okay?" She paused before answering, and in that silence, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't mad at her. I wasn't even hurt. I was just lost. There was nothing to feel. She had stripped away any illusion of trust one had left, and in return, all I felt was emptiness. "No," she said, her voice shaky. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't know what I expect. I just needed you to know." I wanted to ask her why she hadn't told me earlier, why she hadn't confessed when it all started, but I knew the answer. She was selfish. She thought she could keep everything under control, play both sides without consequences. But life doesn't work that way. No one gets to live in two worlds without the seams showing. I hung up the phone without another word. I didn't need to hear any more from her. The reality had set in, and there was no point in dragging this out any further. The woman I had been trusting, the one who had seemed so perfect, had just revealed a side of herself that I didn't recognize. And in that moment, everything changed. I spent the next few hours just sitting in my apartment, numb. I couldn't focus on anything. I couldn't even remember the last time I had felt truly happy. Every memory, every moment I had shared with her, now felt tainted, like I was looking at it through a dirty lens. How had I been so blind? How had I let myself fall for the illusion she had built? The next day, I went to work. I didn't feel like going, but I needed to do something to take my mind off things. I didn't talk to anyone, didn't make small talk. I just sat at my desk, staring at the screen in front of me, pretending to work while my mind raced with thoughts of what had happened the night before. It wasn't until lunchtime that I got another message from her. I didn't want to respond, but I couldn't ignore it. I opened it reluctantly. "Can we talk? I need to explain." I couldn't decide whether I wanted to laugh or cry. What was there left to explain? She had already told me everything I needed to know. But despite everything, despite my better judgment, I agreed to meet her. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for: closure, answers, maybe even an apology. But I knew I couldn't just let it end like this, even if I wasn't ready to forgive her. We met at a coffee shop downtown, a place where we used to go on lazy Sundays. I hadn't been there in months, and when I walked in, the familiar scent of coffee beans and pastries made my stomach twist. It felt like a lifetime ago, when things were easy, when our biggest problem was whether or not we should get a second croissant. She was already there, sitting by the window, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug. She looked the same, beautiful, composed, but there was something different about her. A look in her eyes that I couldn't place. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was something else. But it was there, hiding behind the smile she was trying so hard to maintain. "Hey," she said softly when I approached the table. "I'm glad you came." I didn't sit immediately. I stood there for a moment, just looking at her. She looked smaller in person, somehow more fragile than I remembered. She wasn't the confident, unstoppable woman I had fallen for. No, now she was just human, and that made everything so much worse. "I don't know what you want from me," I said, my voice steady. "You've already told me everything. I don't need an explanation. I just don't know what to do with any of this." She looked down at her coffee, her fingers tracing the rim of the mug as if the answer was hidden there. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said quietly. "I never wanted it to get this far." "Then why did it?" I asked, unable to keep the frustration out of my voice. "Why didn't you tell me when it started? Why did you wait until it was too late?" "I didn't know how to stop," she admitted. "I didn't know how to choose between you and him. I thought I could have both, but I was wrong." I see that now. Her honesty hit me harder than I expected. It was raw, unfiltered, and it made me feel even worse. There was no excuse for what she had done, no way to explain it away. She had knowingly chosen to lie to me, to deceive me, because she couldn't face the truth of her own actions. And that was the hardest pill to swallow. I don't know what to do with all of this, I said, my voice shaking now. I don't know how to go back from this. She didn't have an answer. Neither of us did. The reality was, nothing would ever be the same. We had crossed a line, and there was no going back. I stood up, not knowing what else to say. As I walked out of the coffee shop, I realized that I wasn't just walking away from her. I was walking away from the life I thought I knew. But the worst part was yet to come. I couldn't shake the image of her sitting in that coffee shop, looking so small, so fragile. The whole scene played over and over in my mind as I walked away. I had expected a confrontation, or at the very least, some kind of emotional reckoning. Instead, I felt empty. I had just spent an hour with a woman who I thought I knew, and yet she was a stranger. A person who had hidden pieces of herself from me for so long. And now, the truth felt like a heavy weight I couldn't carry. The next few days were a blur. I didn't hear from her, and part of me didn't want to. I needed time. I needed space. But as much as I tried to push her out of my mind, I found myself constantly thinking about what she had said. I didn't know how to choose between you and him. That phrase kept echoing in my ears. It was a confession, but it wasn't one of regret. It was a simple statement, as though she had been caught in a dilemma, as if it was just another decision to be made. I found myself obsessing over it. Who was this other person? Was he someone I knew? Someone I had seen around? The possibilities gnawed at me. I had to know. I couldn't live in this limbo, not knowing the full extent of what had happened. So, I did something I never thought I would. I reached out to her. It was late at night, and I wasn't sure if I was doing it because I wanted answers or because I couldn't stand the silence anymore. The phone rang for what seemed like an eternity before she finally picked up. "Ben," she said, her voice shaky, as if she'd been waiting for this call. "Who is he?" I asked bluntly, not even bothering with pleasantries. There was a long pause, and for a moment, I thought she wasn't going to answer. But then, she sighed. "His name is Michael. I met him a few months ago. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, but it did." I felt a sick knot form in my stomach. Michael. The name meant nothing to me. He was a ghost, a shadow. But he had been there, in her life, in a way I never was. He had somehow managed to occupy a space that I thought was mine. I didn't know how to feel. Anger, sadness, confusion, they all collided inside me, and for a moment, I couldn't even speak. "Why didn't you tell me?" I finally asked, my voice barely audible. "Why did you let it go on for so long?" "I was scared," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to lose you, and I didn't want to lose him either. I thought maybe I could balance it, but it was a lie. And now, I've ruined everything." I was silent for a long time, letting her words sink in. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss. I couldn't jump, but I couldn't walk away either. I didn't know how to reconcile the person I had thought she was with the person she had turned out to be. "Are you with him now?" I asked, dreading the answer. There was another pause, and when she spoke again, it was like she was talking to someone else, not me. "I don't know. I think I am, but it's all so messed up. I can't think straight." "Do you love him?" I blurted out before I could stop myself. She didn't answer right away, and in that silence, I realized something. The answer didn't matter. It didn't change what had happened. It didn't change the fact that she had betrayed me, that she had given pieces of herself to someone else. I didn't need to hear her confess her feelings for him. What was more important now was understanding why this had happened, why she had done it. "I don't know what to say anymore," she said, her voice cracking. "I messed up, Ben, and I don't think you'll ever forgive me." I didn't respond. What was there left to say? The words felt hollow. In the back of my mind, I knew I should be angry, that I should be demanding more from her. But the truth was, I wasn't angry. I was defeated. I had loved her so completely that I had blinded myself to the cracks in our relationship. And now that they were exposed, I didn't know how to fix it. "Just go," I said, finally breaking the silence. "Go be with him. I don't want to be part of this anymore." There was a moment of hesitation before she spoke again. "Ben, I'm so sorry." But I didn't want to hear it anymore. I hung up before she could say anything else, before I could hear the hollow apology she had given me 1,000 times before. I didn't need her pity. I needed the truth, and I had gotten it. The next few days passed in a blur of sleepless nights and restless thoughts. I tried to focus on work, tried to keep my mind occupied, but everything reminded me of her. The smallest things, a song on the radio, a shared memory, a photograph, sent me into a spiral of what-ifs and maybes. What if I had seen the signs earlier? What if I had done something differently? But no matter how much I asked myself those questions, I knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same. But just when I thought I was beginning to heal, something happened that I hadn't expected. A text from her. "I need to see you one more time. There's something you need to know." I stared at the message for what felt like hours. I had told myself that I was done. I had told myself I would never let her back into my life. But the nagging feeling, the need for closure, wouldn't let me ignore it. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I sat there, staring at the screen, wondering what could possibly be left to say. But I knew deep down that I couldn't walk away without understanding everything. I needed to know the full story, even if it meant facing the painful truth one last time. And so, I agreed to meet her. But this time, I wasn't sure if I was prepared for what I was about to hear. The night I received her text, I felt like I was walking on a tightrope, unsure of whether I was about to fall into the abyss or find solid ground again. I hadn't responded immediately, but the message sat in front of me like an uninvited guest I couldn't ignore. I didn't know what she wanted to tell me, but part of me couldn't walk away without hearing it. What could she possibly say after everything? Was it more lies? Was it another round of apologies I was no longer interested in? I stared at the phone for hours, the words, "I need to see you one more time. There's something you need to know," flashing in my mind over and over. Each time, the same question echoed inside my head. What was left to know? But, despite the numbness in my chest and the anger I felt bubbling up every time I thought about her, I couldn't help but wonder, what if there was something important she hadn't told me? What if there was something that could finally make sense of this whole mess? Part of me wanted to think that there was a chance for some sort of closure, even though the rational side of me screamed that it was a bad idea. In the end, I sent a simple message back. "Fine. Where?" It felt like I was signing up for something I wasn't ready for, but I did it anyway. I needed answers. I needed to understand what had truly happened, even if it broke me further. She replied almost immediately, giving me the name of a quiet park on the edge of town, a place I hadn't been to in years. I'd forgotten about it, to be honest. It was one of those spots where people went to clear their heads, where the hustle and bustle of life felt miles away. A place where, ironically, you were supposed to find peace. But that night, I knew it would be anything but peaceful. I drove there in a haze, the cold winter air biting through the windows as I listened to the hum of the car engine. My thoughts kept spiraling, questions, doubts, fears. What was she going to say? Would this be the final blow that completely shattered me? Or would it give me the clarity I so desperately needed? I had no idea what I was walking into, and the uncertainty gnawed at me with every mile that passed. When I pulled into the parking lot of the park, I could see her standing near the edge, where the trees met the open space. She was holding herself like she was trying to keep together, her shoulders stiff as if she were fighting back something. Tears, guilt, or maybe even her own fear. She hadn't looked like this when I saw her at the coffee shop. That woman was composed, almost in control, hiding behind the weight of her own decisions. But tonight, she looked broken, fragile. I stepped out of the car, my legs moving almost against my will, as if I had no choice but to confront this moment. I didn't know what I expected, but what I saw next wasn't at all what I anticipated. She wasn't just standing there waiting for me. She was holding something, an envelope. "Ben," she said quietly, her voice so soft it was almost drowned by the wind. "Thank you for coming. I know this is the last thing you want, but there's something I have to show you. Something you need to know." I felt my heart tighten in my chest. She was holding something, something that wasn't just another apology or more of the same. This was different. I didn't know if I was ready for whatever was in that envelope, but I knew it had to be important. She wasn't looking me in the eyes as she handed it to me, as if she couldn't face me. "What is this?" I asked, my voice tight. She shook her head slightly. "Please, just open it." I didn't argue. I opened the envelope, pulling out a set of photographs, and what I saw made my stomach lurch. The first photo was of her and Michael, taken at a party. Nothing too compromising at first glance, but there was an intimacy in the way they were standing close, their faces almost touching. Nothing overtly inappropriate, but something about it felt like a betrayal. But it didn't stop there. The next few photos showed them together in various places, more private moments, more subtle signs of affection. I could feel the air leave my lungs as I flipped through them. I couldn't look away, couldn't stop myself from processing each image. The pictures weren't just a glimpse into their relationship. They were a brutal reminder of everything I had been blind to. I couldn't speak. I didn't know how. I had no words left to describe what I was feeling. Betrayal, yes, but something deeper, something sharper. Why didn't you tell me about this? I asked finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I was going to, she said, her voice breaking. I was going to tell you everything, but I didn't know how. I didn't want to hurt you more than I already had. I thought if I kept it hidden, it wouldn't hurt as much. But it was wrong. And now, I see how much I've destroyed. Destroyed. I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. This isn't just destroyed, Marianne. You tore everything apart. She nodded slowly, looking down. I know. And I'm so sorry, Ben. I can't change what I've done, but I wanted you to know the truth. Everything. Not just the pieces I've been giving you. I felt anger rise in my chest, hot and suffocating. I wanted to throw the photos back in her face, wanted to scream at her for everything she had done. But I didn't. I just stood there, staring at her, as the silence stretched between us. Finally, I managed to say, why did you come to me now? Why did you think I needed to know all of this? Because, she paused, her voice thick with emotion. Because I didn't just hurt you, Ben. I hurt myself, too. I was pretending for so long, and now it's all falling apart. I wanted to be honest with you before everything went to hell. Before everything went to hell. Those words hit me like a slap. In a way, I had been living in a lie for months, maybe even longer. And now, I was standing here, trying to piece together what was left of my life after she had shattered it. Do you love him? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop myself. Her face faltered. I don't know, Ben. I really don't know anymore. And that, in some strange way, was the most honest answer she had given me the whole time. The finality of it all hit me like a freight train. I didn't need to know if she loved him. I didn't need anything from her. I needed to move on, to let go of this life, this version of her, that I had so desperately clung to. I didn't say anything else. I turned, walking away without looking back, the cold air biting my skin, but it wasn't as harsh as the chill I felt inside. The hardest part wasn't the photos or the lies. It was knowing that the woman I had trusted, the woman I thought I knew, had been living a completely different life without me. And as I walked away, I realized that the hardest part of all was not knowing if I could ever trust anyone again. The drive home was a blur of emotion, anger, disbelief, sorrow. I didn't know where I was going or why I was driving. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white. But all I could think about were those photos. The way she had handed them to me so calmly, as though she wasn't handing over the last remnants of trust one had in her. Every picture felt like a punch to the gut, each one revealing a side of her I never wanted to see. She had lived a double life, and I was the one who had been blind to it all. But what hurt even more wasn't the affair itself. It was the realization that I had known nothing about it. I arrived home and just sat in my car for what felt like hours. The house was quiet, too quiet. I couldn't bring myself to go inside. The thought of it made my chest tighten. Inside that house were remnants of a life I no longer recognized. I had built it with her, brick by brick. But now, it felt like all those walls had come crashing down. Everything I had trusted, everything I had held dear, had been a lie. When I finally went inside, I couldn't stop myself from going straight to our bedroom. I stood in the doorway, staring at the bed, the empty space where she used to lie. It felt like a ghost was haunting the room, and I wasn't sure if it was her or the memory of who I thought she was. I thought back to all the little moments we had shared, the quiet mornings, the lazy Sundays, the nights when we would talk about our future. I had believed we had a strong foundation, but now I saw it for what it was, a facade. I couldn't stay there. I needed to leave. I grabbed my jacket and keys and headed out the door, not knowing where I was going, but knowing that staying in that house wasn't an option. For the next few days, I lived in a haze. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't find joy in anything I used to love. Every place I went, every person I spoke to, reminded me of her. But it wasn't just the memories of her that were haunting me. It was the doubt that lingered in my mind, the questions that had no answers. How long had she been lying to me? How could I have missed all the signs? How could I have been so naive? But what hurt the most wasn't the affair. It was the realization that she had never truly been the person I thought she was. She had never been the partner I believed in. I had trusted her with everything, my heart, my future, my dreams. And she had thrown it all away for something that wasn't even real. I tried to fill the emptiness with distractions. I hung out with friends, went out to bars, tried to pretend like everything was okay. But the truth was, nothing felt right. I was floating through life like a ghost, unable to connect with anything. I didn't know who I was anymore without her. And even worse, I didn't know who she was without me. A week passed, and I still hadn't heard from her. I didn't want to hear from her. Part of me was afraid of what she might say, but another part of me just needed to move on, to sever the ties, to let go of something that had been broken beyond repair. But then, in the middle of the night, my phone buzzed. It was a message from her. I stared at the screen for a long time before I opened it. I didn't want to, but I couldn't stop myself. Ben, it read, I don't know how to fix what I've done, but I'm asking you to listen to me. Just one more time. Please. There's something I never told you, something I need you to know, something that might make sense of all of this. I felt a surge of emotion. My mind raced. What more could she possibly say? What was left to say? Everything I needed to know, I already knew. I wasn't sure what answer I was hoping for. Was I looking for some kind of apology? Closure? Was I even capable of forgiveness at this point? I didn't reply right away. Instead, I sat there, staring at the message, weighing the decision in my mind. Part of me wanted to shut it all down, block her number, and never look back. But another part of me, one that I hated for still caring, wanted to hear her out. Maybe, just maybe, there was a shred of truth left in her. Maybe she had something to say that would make sense of the madness. Finally, I couldn't resist. I typed out a single word. Where? She replied almost instantly. The same place. Tomorrow at 7 p.m. Please, just hear me out. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to hear her voice again. Didn't want to be in the same room with her. But I needed to know. I needed to understand the full story, even if it shattered me further. So I agreed. The next evening, I drove to the same park where we had met before. I tried to prepare myself, but I didn't know how. What could she possibly say that would make a difference? What truth could possibly redeem her actions? When I arrived, she was already there, standing in the same spot as before. This time, she wasn't holding an envelope. She looked different, more vulnerable, more fragile. I didn't know what had happened to her, but it was clear that whatever had driven her to this point had broken her too. Ben, she said as I approached, her voice quiet. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need to tell you something. I need you to understand. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, waiting for her to speak, waiting for whatever bombshell she was about to drop. I didn't know if I was ready for it, but I had no choice. There's something you need to know about Michael, she continued, her eyes filled with a mix of guilt and sorrow. The truth is, I didn't just fall in love with him. He was someone I needed, someone who made me feel alive in ways I wasn't feeling with you. But that's not the whole truth. The real reason I kept him a secret is because he's the one who convinced me to stay with you. He didn't want me to break up with you, Ben. He wanted me to keep lying, to keep you in the dark. He wanted to have both of us, and I let him. And for that, I am so sorry. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had known there was more to the story, but I hadn't expected this. Michael hadn't just been an affair. He had been a manipulator, pulling the strings, guiding her decisions. And she had let him. I'm so sorry, she repeated, her voice breaking. I never wanted to hurt you. I don't know how to make this right. I don't know if I can. The shock of it all left me speechless. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to process the revelation. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had allowed herself to be manipulated, and in doing so, she had dragged both of us into a mess I couldn't even begin to untangle. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of clarity. It wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It wasn't about what she had done. It was about what I needed to do next. The truth had come out, and now, it was time for me to move on. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there in the park, the weight of her confession hanging between us. And as I walked away, I realized something. The hardest part wasn't forgiving her. The hardest part was realizing that I had to forgive myself. The following days were a haze of confusion, anger, and disbelief. After the revelation in the park, I felt like I was suspended between two worlds. The world I thought I knew, where trust and love were foundational, had crumbled, leaving me with a jagged hole in my chest that I wasn't sure how to repair. And then there was the world I was now thrust into, one where lies, manipulation, and broken promises had seeped into every corner. But it wasn't just about Marianne anymore. It wasn't about Michael either, or even the affair. It was about me. I spent hours thinking, rethinking, replaying every moment of my life with her. How had I missed all the signs? What had I been so blind to? It was as if I had been living in a dream, one where everything was perfect, but the nightmare was always lurking just beneath the surface. The worst part was that I had trusted her with everything, my heart, my future, my hope, and she had shattered it all. I had tried to ignore it. I'd thrown myself into work, into distractions, anything to stop thinking about it. But every night, when the world grew quiet and I was left alone with my thoughts, the weight of what had happened sank in even deeper. It wasn't just about her betrayal. It was about the fact that everything I had believed in was now called into question. What did it mean to trust someone? How could I ever look at someone the same way again? Was I just a fool for believing in love and loyalty? Then came the text. It was from her, of course. After the last conversation, I had told myself I was done with all of it. I didn't want to hear from her again. But this time, it was different. The message was short, almost too simple. I need to see you. It's important. I sat with the phone in my hand for what felt like hours. The temptation to respond was almost overpowering, but a part of me, the part that had been broken so many times, wanted nothing more than to leave this all behind. To cut her off, to start over, to forget that any of this ever happened. But another part of me, the part that had invested so much into the relationship, still wanted to hear her out. What could she possibly have to say now? After everything? I debated for a while before finally texting back. What's it about? She replied almost instantly. I can't explain here. Please just meet me. I swear it's important. The urgency in her words tugged at something inside me. I knew I was risking more heartache by agreeing to meet with her, but a part of me still wanted answers. Answers that didn't come in vague, cryptic messages. We agreed to meet at a quiet bar on the edge of town, a place we used to go to before everything started falling apart. It seemed fitting, in a way. A place that had once been full of laughter and lighthearted conversations now felt like the scene of a crime. I arrived early, not sure what to expect. I ordered a drink and sat at a table in the corner, trying to ignore the flutter of nerves in my stomach. I hadn't seen her in days, and the thought of seeing her again, especially after everything, felt like walking into the eye of a storm. She arrived 15 minutes later, looking almost the same, but somehow different. Her hair was down, flowing around her shoulders in waves. Her eyes, though, were the first thing I noticed. They were tired, not the bright, confident eyes I had fallen for, but something darker, heavier. She looked like she had aged years in the past few weeks. But there was a kind of resolve in her posture, a seriousness that made my heart race for all the wrong reasons. She sat across from me, not making eye contact at first. Ben, I'm sorry, she started, her voice barely above a whisper. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to listen. Please. I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me wanted to get up and walk away, to never see her again. But another part of me was still clinging to the last thread of hope, the hope that maybe, just maybe, there was something in her that still cared enough to explain. I took a deep breath and said, What is it you need to tell me? I don't know how much more of this I can take, Marianne. You've already told me everything I thought I needed to know. She looked at me for the first time, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of guilt and fear. You don't know everything, Ben. There's more to this than just Michael. I've been lying to you for months, and I can't keep living with myself. I need to come clean, not just for you, but for me. I felt my heart stop for a second. What are you talking about? I thought I knew everything. I thought you had already said it all. She shook her head, her hands trembling slightly as she took a sip of her drink. No, there's something you still don't know. Something I never told you. Something that's been eating at me since the beginning. I leaned forward, my body tense. What is it? I asked, my voice suddenly hoarse. She paused, collecting her thoughts, before finally speaking again. Michael wasn't the only one who was pulling the strings. There was someone else. Someone from my past. The words hit me like a slap. Someone else? Who? She looked away, her gaze wandering to the glass in front of her. My ex. The one I told you about a long time ago. We've kept in touch over the years, and he's always been there, lurking in the background. When things started to go wrong with us, he reached out again. And I was weak. I let him in. I didn't want to hurt you, Ben, but I didn't know how to let go of him, either. I felt a rush of anger flood through me, but I pushed it down. So, you were juggling 3 people? You were lying to all of us, including yourself? Her face crumpled with regret. I didn't want it to be this way. I didn't want to hurt you. But I was stuck. I was too afraid to let go of what was comfortable, even if it meant losing everything. Even if it meant losing you. I sat back, processing her words. A part of me wanted to scream at her, to demand answers, to ask how she could betray me like this. But I didn't. I was done with the anger. The truth was, the lies had hurt more than anything. And now, as I sat there across from her, I realized that the person I had once loved, maybe still loved, was someone I would never truly understand. Do you love him? I asked, my voice shaking despite myself. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. I don't know anymore. I thought I did. But what I felt for him wasn't love, Ben. It was something else. Something I couldn't escape from. I never meant to hurt you, but I was running away from myself. I don't know who I am anymore. The silence between us felt like an eternity. There were no more words left to say. No more apologies that could erase what had happened. I had given her everything, and she had betrayed me, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but the remnants of a broken past. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this, I said, standing up and pushing my chair back. I've heard enough, Marianne. I've heard enough to know that I can't keep living in this lie anymore. She didn't try to stop me as I walked away. I didn't look back. The only thing I knew was that I had to move forward, away from the wreckage she had left behind. As I stepped out into the night, the cold air biting at my skin, I realized that the hardest part wasn't her betrayal. The hardest part was learning to trust myself again. I didn't sleep that night. The conversations, the revelations, everything felt like it was spiraling out of control in my head. Marianne's confession had left me feeling hollow, like a part of me had been ripped out, and all that was left were the jagged edges. Her words echoed in my mind, but the clarity I had been hoping for never came. What was I supposed to do with this? I had asked for the truth, and now that I had it, it felt like a curse. I had always believed that truth was the foundation of any relationship, that once the lies were uncovered, you could rebuild from the ashes. But Marianne's truth, her twisted, tangled truth, had completely shattered any hope of that. She wasn't the person I thought she was. She wasn't the woman I had built my life around. And the worst part? She didn't even seem to recognize what she had done to us, to me. She had spent months deceiving herself, and in doing so, she had destroyed everything we had. I spent the next day in a fog. I went to work, pretending everything was fine, smiling at people who had no idea what I was going through. The disconnection was suffocating. I couldn't focus. Every task, every conversation, felt like a weight I couldn't lift. It wasn't just her betrayal anymore. It was the realization that I had lost myself in all of it. I had become so consumed by trying to hold on to something that wasn't real, that I had forgotten what it meant to truly be me. That evening, I decided to go for a walk. I needed to clear my head. The weather had turned colder, a sharp breeze cutting through the streets as I walked aimlessly, not sure where I was heading. The city felt alive, full of movement and noise, but I was in a world of my own. The streets were familiar, but nothing felt familiar anymore. My thoughts kept drifting back to Marianne, to her face when she had told me the truth. There had been no remorse in her eyes, only exhaustion, as if she had been carrying a burden for so long, and finally, she had been forced to drop it at my feet. And that was the hardest part. She had never fought for us. She hadn't even tried. She had let me go without a fight, believing she could have both worlds. She was willing to lose me without ever really understanding what that meant. I was a chapter in her story, but she had already moved on to the next. I found myself standing in front of a familiar bar, the one where Marianne and I had spent so many nights talking, laughing, planning. It wasn't a place I'd planned on visiting again, but something about it drew me in. I hesitated for a moment before pushing open the door. The warmth from inside hit me immediately, but it did nothing to soothe the chill that had settled in my bones. I ordered a drink and sat at the bar, nursing it slowly. The place hadn't changed much. The same bartender, the same low hum of conversation. But it was all different now. I wasn't here with her. There was no quiet intimacy, no shared glances over a glass of wine. There was just me, trying to figure out what was left of my life after everything had fallen apart. As I stared into my drink, lost in thought, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to see a woman standing there, a friendly smile on her face. She was attractive, but I wasn't in the mood for small talk. Still, I gave her a nod. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice sweet but tentative. "I couldn't help but notice you sitting here alone. Are you all right?" I gave her a half smile. "I'm fine," I replied, though I wasn't. "Just thinking." She raised an eyebrow, clearly sensing something deeper. "Yeah, I can see that. Want to talk about it?" I hesitated. I wasn't looking for a distraction, but for some reason, her presence felt comforting, even if just for a moment. It was like a brief escape from the storm in my head. "I don't know," I muttered. "It's a long story." "Well," she said, sitting down next to me, "I've got time. And I'm a pretty good listener." Something about her offer felt genuine, so I found myself telling her a piece of my story. I didn't tell her everything. I didn't need to, but enough that she understood. The betrayal, the lies, how my whole life had been turned upside down in a matter of weeks. I wasn't looking for advice. I wasn't even looking for sympathy. I just needed to get it out, to speak the words I had been holding in. She listened intently, nodding every now and then as I spoke, her eyes sympathetic. When I finished, I felt a little lighter. But it wasn't a complete release. It wasn't enough. "I'm sorry you're going through all that," she said quietly. "But I think you're right about one thing. You can't keep living in the past. I know it's hard, but sometimes you just have to let go. You can't hold on to people who don't hold on to you." Her words stung, but they were true. As much as I hated to admit it, I had been holding on to a ghost. Marianne was no longer the woman I loved. She had become a stranger, and no matter how much I tried to hold on to the pieces of the past, they were slipping through my fingers. "I don't know how to let go," I said, my voice almost breaking. "Letting go doesn't mean forgetting," she replied softly. "It just means you're ready to move forward. And you deserve that. You deserve to find peace, to heal." For a moment, I just sat there, the weight of her words sinking in. I had been clinging to the past, to the idea of what I thought we had. But what we had was gone, and no amount of holding on was going to bring it back. The question wasn't how to make things right with Marianne. The question was how to make things right with myself. The woman gave me a small smile, sensing I needed time to process everything. "I'm not saying it's going to be easy," she added, "but I believe you'll get there." For the first time in days, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could get there. I didn't have the answers, and I didn't know where my life would go from here. But I knew one thing. I couldn't keep holding on to someone who didn't want to be held. As I finished my drink and stood up to leave, I thanked her for the conversation, and she nodded, her smile reassuring. It wasn't a magic fix. There were still a lot of pieces I had to pick up. But for the first time since all of this began, I felt a glimmer of hope. It was time to let go, and it was time to start living for myself. The days that followed felt different, lighter, somehow. It was like the weight I had been carrying for so long had finally been lifted, piece by piece. Letting go wasn't a single moment of clarity. It was a slow process, a decision I had to make every day. But each morning, I woke up with a little more peace. The anger, the hurt, the confusion, they didn't disappear overnight, but they faded into the background, replaced by something I hadn't expected: hope. I didn't reach out to Marianne. I didn't need to. Her chapter in my life had ended, and I wasn't sure if there was anything left to say. The closure I thought I needed didn't come from her. It came from within me. I had finally accepted that some things weren't meant to be fixed, and that was okay. Life wasn't just about holding on to what you once had. It was about learning, growing, and moving forward. One Saturday afternoon, a few weeks later, I decided to take a walk in the park. It wasn't anything extraordinary, but it felt like a fresh start. The sun was shining, the trees were blooming with new life, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was part of something bigger. I wasn't alone in the world. I had a future, a life ahead of me that was mine to shape. As I walked, I found myself smiling for no reason at all. A small breeze lifted my hair, and for a brief moment, everything felt right. I realized that life would go on, and I would go on with it. I wasn't broken, not anymore. I had learned to find my own strength, my own sense of self, and that was the most important thing. I hadn't been looking for love or anything close to it, but when I stopped searching for it, that's when it found me. She was sitting on a bench by the fountain, reading a book, and there was something about her calm presence that drew me in. She looked up as I walked past. Our eyes met, and for the briefest moment, everything around us faded away. She smiled, a soft and genuine smile, and I couldn't help but smile back. "I don't mean to interrupt," I said, taking a step closer. "But is that The Alchemist you're reading?" Her eyes lit up. "It is. I'm always surprised when someone recognizes it. It's one of my favorites." "I've read it too," I said, sitting down beside her. "It's amazing, isn't it?" We spent the next hour talking about books, life, dreams, and everything in between. It felt easy, natural. The conversation flowed like we had known each other for years. It wasn't about rushing into something or trying to fill a void. It was about connection, about two people simply enjoying each other's company. By the time we stood up to leave, I realized something. I had let go of the past, but that didn't mean I had to give up on the future. The future was still unwritten, still full of possibilities. I didn't know where things would go with this woman, or if it would even go anywhere. But for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that. I was okay with not having all the answers. "You know," she said as we walked towards the park exit, "I'm glad we met today. I wasn't expecting to talk to anyone, but now I feel like my whole afternoon just got a lot better." "Me too," I said with a smile. It's funny how life works out sometimes. We exchanged numbers, and I walked away with a feeling I hadn't had in months, a sense of possibility. That evening, as I sat in my apartment, I reflected on everything. The pain, the heartbreak, the confusion, it had all led me to this moment. I had learned that sometimes, life had to break you down in order to build you up again. It wasn't just about surviving the storm. It was about dancing in the rain, about learning to trust yourself when everything else falls apart. And as I looked out the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized that the best was yet to come. I wasn't defined by what had happened to me. I was defined by what I chose to do next. This was the beginning of something new, and I was ready to embrace it.